Di meeting kita ini kita live streaming juga via YouTube ya. Nanti automatically recorded. We have the recorded session ya. Once the webinar completed ya. So everyone who cannot attend this webinar can watch the event through YouTube for sure.
Saya izin share live streamnya juga ke partisipan USAID Advance, Pak Habibie dan Pak Victor.
Ya. Pak Bambang atau Bu Regina sudah ada di ini hadir? Pak Habibie.
Pak Bambangnya lagi nyiapin laptop. Kira-kira 2-3 menit lagi harusnya udah join kita, Pak. Di sini Mbak Reginanya udah hadir. Kita juga ada Pak Kayan ya, Pak Kayan Sutrisna yang sudah hadir, Sekretaris Badan Kejuruan Sipil PII. Pak Kayan, silakan Pak.
Ya, selamat siang Pak Resak. Nih, bentar setting dulu, setting background. Terima kasih.
Ya, Pak Kayan, selamat datang.
Wah, selamat datang Cikgu, Pak Prestio. Ya, bentar setting background dulu ya. Sabar.
Sorry Pak Kayan.
Sore Bapak.
Kita udah hadir juga Ketua Badan Kejuruan Sipil PII, Pak Bambang Guritno. Baru bergabung. Selamat siang, Pak BG.
Selamat siang Pak BG, Pak Ken, Pak Prestio.
Siang Pak Bambang.
Selamat siang Pak Bambang.
Selamat siang Pak Wayan. Pak Wayan, narasumber kita juga udah hadir di sesi ini.
Halo, selamat siang. Selamat siang, Pak Razak.
Selamat siang, Prof.
Halo, selamat siang, Pak Bambang, Prof.
Selamat siang, Prof. Ya.
Siang Pak Wayan.
Siang semuanya.
Siang.
Ya, Pak Bambang, selamat siang tuh.
Selamat siang, ya Pak Prasiwo.
Ya, backgroundnya sudah diganti pas itu.
Sudah pas, ya.
Baru kemarin sepedaan di sini, Pak ya.
Iya, baru sepeda situ. Ini juga baru datang dari luar. Pas. Just on time.
Ya, mungkin kita udah bisa mulai kali ya, Pak Bambang. Pak
Boleh,
Pras.
boleh, boleh. Boleh.
Silakan, Pak Pras.
Oke, baik. Mas Imam monitor ya. Oke, ya. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Ya, selamat siang para pemateri, para panelis maupun moderator yang hadir di acara webinar hari ini. Okay. So today this webinar is the title about the role of professional engineer in earthquake emergency and disaster preparedness response and recovery. Jadi webinar hari ini kerjasama antara Badan Kejuruan Teknik Sipil Persatuan Insinyur Indonesia, kemudian bersama dengan kami dari PI Cabang Batam dan PI Wilayah Kepulauan Riau. Oke. Jadi yang saya hormati Bapak Insinyur Bambang Guritno selaku Ketua BK Sipil, kemudian yang kami hormati para speaker ya yang ada di webinar ini. So Dr. Kit Miyamoto, I think she will present at the recorded ya. Then Miss Liva Seresta, ya, she has been attend on this webinar. Kemudian Prof. Wayan, welcome Prof. Dan Miss Julia Radcliffe. Oke. Kemudian kita ada dua panelis, Bapak Insinyur Habibie Razak Apek Eng, kemudian Bapak Insinyur Franky Ken. Welcome Pak. Dan again moderator Victor Rembet, ya Pak. Okay, for this first of agenda, kita akan menyanyikan, akan diputar lagu Indonesia Raya, kemudian setelah itu diiringi oleh himne Persatuan Insinyur Indonesia. Silakan Mas Imam selaku admin untuk memulai. Terima kasih.
Indonesia tanah airku, Indonesia kemanusiaan.
berbudi luhur dan berintegritas, kompeten dan profesional, bertanggung jawab sepenuh hati. Kami insinyur Indonesia, kami menerangi negeri, mempersatukan Nusantara, membuka cakrawala dunia. Kami insinyur Indonesia, kami memajukan bangsa, mensejahterakan masyarakat untuk kemanusiaan semesta alam. Kami insinyur Indonesia, siap membangun bangsa.
Thank you, Mas Imam. Okay, so we go to the next agenda. Opening remark by Chairman of Civil Engineering College or Badan Kejuruan Teknik Sipil, PII. Please welcome Mr. Insinyur Bambang Buditno, MSc, MPA, IPU. Time is yours, Pak. Thank you.
Terima kasih Pak Prastiwo. Sudah dengar ya?
Sudah, Pak.
Ya.
Oke. Selamat siang, distinguished speakers, moderator, engineers, and all guests. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang, good day, Om Swastiastu, salam sejahtera untuk semuanya. Thanks God, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all in this 6th BKS webinar, conducted by Badan Kejuruan Sipil Persatuan Insinyur Indonesia, or in English, Civil Engineering College, the Institution of Engineers Indonesia. I hope that you are always in a good health, good mind, and every success. Engineers, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about natural disaster of this type. I believe that most of us agree to these statements. There is lack of understanding regarding the role of professional engineer in earthquake emergency, disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. There is a necessity to disseminate or share the latest seismic hazard map and present seismic code and standard in Indonesia. In particular, for engineers, it is crucially important to understand about seismicity and disasters in Indonesia and its comparison in other countries. Then, lack of knowledge in disaster or emergency preparedness and response. Based on such needs and importance, this webinar is enthusiastically conducted by civil engineering colleagues of the Institution of Engineer Indonesia, aiming at the objectives such as to underline the role of professional engineer in earthquake emergency and disaster preparedness, response and recovery, both in Indonesia and overseas. To introduce seismicity and disasters in Indonesia. Wait a minute, I did change the, okay.
Yeah, the screen
is
change it, Pak.
Okay. Okay. And then secondly, to introduce seismicity and disasters in Indonesia, Thirdly, to enhance Indonesian hazard maps. And finally, to acquire practical knowledge on the disaster and emergency preparedness and response from the home of modern seismic safety code, such as California and Indonesia's experience in this area. Engineers, ladies and gentlemen, from today's webinar, since we have excellent speakers, Pak Kit Miyamoto, Ibu Liva, and then Professor Wayan Sengara, as well as Ibu Julia Radcliffe. We hope that we will have participants who should have a broader opportunity to discuss issues related with seismic emergency preparedness, response and recovery, among others, identification of building vulnerability through post-disaster surveys, resilient communities through update and compliance and enforcement of building code, sharing the perspective, knowledge, and experience as a professional engineer or structural engineer in California on the role and responsibility of every professional engineer or structural engineer in disaster or emergency preparedness and response. Then sharing the speaker's experience as a professional engineer in leading and training dozens of engineers to inspect, design, and retrofit thousands of houses in Kathmandu since 2015 Korkas earthquake. Discussion and framework on a framework for professional engineer or structural engineer, professional development to work in humanitarian and international development contexts, such as earthquake response. To close my remarks, allow me to extend my appreciation and thanks to all colleagues at PI Wilayah Kepulauan Riau and Cabang Batam, Pak Prastiwo, for their support and continuous collaboration with Badan Kejuruan Sipil PIAI, or civil engineering colleagues of the PIAI in hosting this webinar. Thanks also to our honorary speakers, moderator Pak Rembeth, and all participants for their sharing with us. We do hope that this webinar will be fruitful and beneficial to us. With God's permission, allow me now to officially open this webinar. Thank you very much. Enjoy the webinar. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Santi 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 Om. Selamat siang.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much for the chairman of Badan Kejuruan Sipil PII, Mr. Insinyur Babang Guritno. Okay, so yes, now we go to the main agenda. So I will pass the leader of this webinar to moderator, Bapak Victor Rembeth. Please, Pak. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Prastiwo, for this great moment of I think, time of learning and sharing knowledge of PII, Indonesia Engineer Association, and then, of course, thanks for the great remark, Pak Bambang, as the chairman of Civil Engineering College, to open this session. We are so glad that this is not just a usual webinar. This is an international, of course, PII has a commitment for doing this. And again, thank you for PII PC Cabang or branch of Batam, who is willing to do the hard works of preparing and preparation, and then of course for PII Kepulauan Riau as also a part of this organizing roles. Thank you again for all, and then for all the participants, ladies and gentlemen. We are so blessed to have 4 internationals and also international level. So we're glad that we have 1 Indonesian and 3 international speakers, which will provide us with great things on as Pak Bambang says that we live in a prone area of disasters, and then the natural hazard is around us, and surely earthquake is one of the despite it is not as often as other hydrometeorological hazard, but earthquake hazard is something that can deadly and kills a lot of people, and the loss and damage are so painful for many of us. So I'm Victor Rambet. I'm at USAID Advanced Program, practitioners of disaster risk management, and I'm glad that PII has this initiative to do role of professional engineers in earthquake emergency, disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. Furthermore, I will introduce the resource person one by one before they are going to share the material. So the first one, I would like to invite Pak Kit Miyamoto. Yeah, we call it Pak Kit, Dr. Kit Miyamoto. As you know, he is the CEO of Miyamoto International. Miyamoto is engineering, civil and engineering companies, and then he's also the chairman of California Seismic Safety Commission. At the moment, he is now in Haiti. Haiti, just as we realized, Haiti just got struck by a very bad earthquake in August, and he is somewhere in Haiti, which the internet connection is bad, and therefore he's sending us a tapping to see what he meant by, or as a role of professional engineer and earthquake emergency disaster and preparedness response. The time is yours, Pak Kit Miyamoto. Would like to have someone to share the video.
Halo, ya mohon maaf semuanya, Pak Dr. Kit sedang berada di gunung di Haiti untuk respon earthquake-nya, jadi beliau belum bisa call in. Jadi untuk itu beliau tapi sudah pre-recording videonya dan akan saya play dari screen saya. Izin waktunya.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Kit Miyamoto. I'm a global senior national and also the chairman of the Safety Commission. Today, I'm talking to you from that we respond to disaster. Earthquake disaster happened in August this year. So we've been working there for the past almost 3 months. Okay, this title of the presentation is Earthquake Preparedness, Response, Recovery, Global Perspective. Let's look at our company, International. We are located at 25 different locations globally, and we are located along this local line of 5 conflict preparedness, response. About California Safety Commission. This is like really the backbone of how the California area. That's 1975. In 1975, it set up the state of California and assigned the 15 commissions, and 10 members actually approved by government. And the members break down from local government officials, engineers, and structural engineers. Having a commission 7 years. And main function is commission advice, provide technical advice, help state administrator, and the government. That's our main. This question is government officers for emergency service. So the California Earthquake Loss Reduction Plan break down 7 different elements. So science, R&D, education, economics, and use, buildings, transportation, preparedness, response. So these areas become ideas as a issue. So essentially, we provide many of the different guidance. For example, this is a partial orders guide for earthquake safety. We just recently reviewed this again out. commercial business owners, their asset can be protected. What kind of things they do. So that kind of technical guidance is all done by the California professional engineers. And also one of the things we do through the agency of Bushman, provide a hospital seismic safety in California. For past since the late 1990s, California is trying to do seismic strengthening of its hospital. And it's been not easy. The hospital is very complicated, architecturally very complicated structure, system, and many older buildings, and they're being used. So doing the seismic strengthening is not an easy task. So it takes decades essentially to provide the safety, but that's our mission. The hospitals are really important building asset after the major disasters. In California, we have a lot of unreinforced masonry building, essentially older structures. Something you see like this in Indonesia and Jakarta, many places. Essentially the red brick construction. And here in California, some cases large buildings, they are made of unreinforced masonry. So this program was established in early 1990s and implemented for about 10 years. And almost 70% of those buildings are retrofitted or needed replaced. So this is one of actually most successful programs. One of the successes actually coming from the engineering approach is the very reasonable. Not to just try to meet this unreinforced masonry or all the brick buildings to meet the so-called latest, say, building code that become really cost prohibitive. Rather than that, actually it's providing the certain lessen the weakness of the structure. For example, one thing we know is URM structures have a plane failures, which means the wall just fall off from the building itself. That's one of the most dangerous common failure modes. So essentially providing the bolts into the epoxy into the walls, attached to the floor and roof, that will make stabilize. So much better. It's not really it doesn't meet the 2% of say new building code, but the risk is reduced. Critical matter. Very cost effective. So we basically provide that type of cost effective approach. Basically provide a reasonable approach to reduce the risk. In California, fire falling after the earthquake is a big deal. And especially a place like LA, many of those buildings or structures, houses that are made of wood. And expectation is after the major earthquake, thousands of houses will be burning simultaneously. That's actually a big deal because of the fire department don't have capacity. So seismic safety commission getting to the a few years ago, they actually set up the cameras statewide to watch the actual fire itself. And now that particular fire camera being used for the wildfire, as you may have probably heard in the news, wildfires in mountains and forests, it's a very big threat. So this actually started as the seismic network, actually, believe it or not, because it does need a big bandwidth, have the seismic network to understand what is the eruption story. So that particular network bandwidth being used to actually capture the fire story. So it's multi-purpose, multi-hazard application. And in Cal OES, the Office of Emergency Service, and one of the main things they do after the major earthquake is the safety assessment, or some say damage assessment. So-called green means inspected, safe occupied, yellow, use, and because of the certain damage exists, and red is major dependent. So those things is commonly used globally, but now it's actually originated from the 80s, 20 documentation. By the Atlantic Coast Council in California, and then after the California OES. That's how we started that. It was back in 2005. So trainings pretty elaborated. Trainings is for the evaluators themselves, the support engineers, inspectors, or architects, and also training for coordinators, such as building officials, emergency managers who are actually deploy the engineers and organize forces themselves, and also train the trainers to evaluate, train the evaluator system. One of the most important things in the United States is how the environment can limit the life. So for because of engineers, professional engineers, many of private engineers go up to the site to evaluate damage green, yellow, red. But they're doing it for public service. In many cases, we do the volunteering. So essentially, when making that type of engineering rapid assessment, we need liability protection percent. So there are many things in California to the United States to be able to protect us. Biggest thing is each of us volunteer engineers. I went to 1994 Northridge earthquake. First thing I got is going to the LAS City Building Department, and they deputized me as a local government engineer. I'm paid obviously. So that itself has a certain protections or a liability. I thought that was a very good way of dealing with that. And also the many other elements that you know protect engineers. It's actually critical because we do need many engineers, thousands of them, and in many cases, the plenty engineers. So I want to talk about the what happened in 2021 Haiti earthquake, because the main thing I just discussed what we are preparing in California and doing the things. It's actually happening in Haiti, and it's damaged in a repair assessment, and we actually conducting right now. Just to be kind of good, we would have what could happen in capitals. Well, anyway. Okay, that's August 14th. It's 97.2, so it's not that small earthquake, and it's a shallow depth, about 10K, and affected about 1 million people. The government estimated first week was about 2,000 plus victims, but I think that number is pretty much higher because it's only a first estimate. And estimated about 100 to 130,000 houses and buildings, schools and hospitals that damaged, collapsed. And right after that, actually, there's a hurricane race happened, and that actually totally destroyed some of the buildings. And one of the most difficulty is right now it's not only destruction of this, those buildings, people who are victim, to do something with them, but also the security of Haiti here is very difficult. You may have heard it last week, 2 weeks ago actually, the 17 Americans and the Canadian, the missionaries, they got kidnapped, they just moving the bus by the gang members, and they're looking for ransoms. So things like this year alone, there's over 600 people. So because of that, it's essentially main roads. We have to use airplane, helicopters, ships. That's how we actually get the points. And at June, the president of Haiti sustained it. So therefore, it's definitely unstable at the best. And obviously, COVID-19 pandemic is going at the same things. It's definitely the not environment to damage the system there. Some of the failure pictures. This was the just used to be used for building. It's unreinforced. It's a reinforced actually. The confined masonry structure. But obviously, the reinforcement is putting out flaps. Before little flaps, we see things like this everywhere. Essentially, you get 100,000 construction flaps. Like I city with like I which the making there. And some of the large structures like this, you can see what happens to the function ground level. Just quite a bit of it. And that goes building. And this is probably the earthquake is a 5 second longer. Lost the probably whole thing. By the way, the city like right here is quite far from the center. At least the 50s, 60 years or maybe more. but even that is quite a hit construction. So far, we assessed about 4,000 buildings in this area, and about 60% of it is either yellow or red damage. As you can see, there's a lot of dark homes. Many of the irrigation sections you see in that picture, this about 200 of them they are damaged and collapsed. Double area. So it's a big loss for the cultural experiences. If this school made about 100 meters Main Street, you can go to find the elements and you can see the seismic portion course that I would like to tell you about what itself. Fortunately, things will collapse because of the vertical loading carrying capacity observed by the walls. It's a school again. Now, unfortunately, this project was early on Saturday, so therefore school was night session. So therefore, very few students. If this is an afternoon school days, hours, it's definitely a lot of loss. A major structure like this is a suspension bridge built by the ancient government. By dragons, actually, and you can see this vertical cable. You can see it's extremely efficient because you see three rod conduction lines, so it's one and carry more wood. Stress. Actually, and we'll sort out some actually traffic for this month, and with the books, we can see we're trying to provide fast repair, more like a short. So we talked about thousands of construction very widespread area. It's very tropical, Japanese. It's a beautiful area by the way. And just mountainous. And actually the geography provides a lot of islands. Those places would be one of the beauty of this geographical diversity in this compound. Countries, as you know, so all those countries I visit, unfortunately, there's definitely a big risk that happen. I must say, it's like disappointing. So homeowners, they don't have much to exactly imagine they're a very cool country, and but they have no money. They have to do something. But they have the damage assistance, especially with their advice how to actually repair that damaged houses. So basically what we did here is this projects are funded by World Bank by the United Nations. At the Yamato is essentially providing the operational for the Williams event. And under the Ministry of activities. And the way it's organized is essentially the like our there is the 15 different divisions. Each division is the system of 28 staff members. 18 of them there's 9 of them is the social communication between the people after a disaster. So each of the division consists of 3 different teams. That division is organized by the engineers, and that's how the division. There's an international expert like yourself to kind of provide some about this organization. more than 300 engineers have been trained actually in the and there's an examination at the very end. Examination passages, damage comparison. One part of it, you really comparison. So the California system, or any other place, or actually damages, right? Great damages. It's actually the some case, like comparison system. Reason is such a widespread outdated for job. It's hard to get just get the places. So doing damages itself, doing that those are the more than damages they actually know how to fix, how to repair damages. So usually the assessment is made by the two engineers in the pair and a social and division is basically distributed out of all three departments and offices. And in each area essentially zone that's how we go. And those divisions will be in the bus. And each of us suspect include the basic building, which is such as number of floors, type of use, material used, what kind of structural elements, concrete or wood, and also evaluate damage on the bed and what percent of damage, and also the major for the damage and display it. Of course, is the once engineer identify damage pattern, reassign damage pattern, and measure the damage length or crack length. Would not be connected out what methods has to use here, and what quantity of materials and so use the app called toolbox. Then each building has this is because of the equals for painting here because of the paper when that it can be strong. It's actually a each building. And also QR code each building. So the homeowners use the smartphone. It's very possible to do this one. And I think that essentially the picture of it be able to access this community, showing the damage text, and also repair evidence. So that's actually the most important part of it, you know, and just provide the damage assessment, repair strategy, and essentially cost. Because people can see the damage already, you know. I don't think that makes a huge difference. Many people like it green because they can see that they're building a house that's inside use. They understand that like those kinds of the ones come from the yellow damaged buildings and they fix it. They just know how to fix it. That's the question like this. So you see that the wall is a figure, right? One, two, one is actually get a damage. That's okay. That's a picture. Fix the view of damage. And F2 is the certain walls practicals here. So on the actual building itself, this equation is analyzed. It's just a data analysis. And so there's a logic for in this COBOL database going to ArcGIS. Logic flow calculations to quantify the repair of the functions. So I think the for professional engineers like you are, I think our mission is extremely critical. Obviously, for the before disaster, for perfect, for weekends, we can do a lot of things. We notice that the monitor for the stage avoidance, the cameras to capture fire, many other things. But also after the disaster, also our responsibility duties is extremely critical. So we're doing that engineers, we can change the outcome to what's going on with the negotiations. But what we can do is we can provide the information to the public, how to fix it, how to repair it, how much. That's really important. Next step for us is actually have the wide communication training campaign to the homeowners, the contractors, masons in the field, so they understand how to use that report, and also engage the funding from different sources, because many people can afford it. That's our job as engineers. So we are very critical part of society. Thank you.
Thank you. Terima kasih Pak Kit Miyamoto is sending his video because he's now in Haiti where internet connection is unstable and he could not do online at the moment. At least we are called to do the same, each one of us, because he said, let's make the world a safer place for together. It's something that a call for PII and all of us here. And his presentations covering at least presentasinya paling tidak membahas about best practice in the state of California where he resides, and also actually live in the most prone earthquake areas in the US. So California adalah tempat yang paling rawan bencana gempa di Amerika, yang bisa bahkan menghasilkan secondary hazard, yaitu kebakaran dan juga wildfire atau kebakaran hutan. So according to those situation and condition, he's trying to say that at least there are three things that they do. First is try to propose a regulation, kebijakan untuk building codes and everything, and also raising awareness of all people, of all stakeholders. And then, of course, training for engineers and trying to include as many as engineers as possible to be aware of the condition of California. And then he moves to Haiti, where he is now, where he's doing his project at the moment. Untuk Haiti, dia melakukannya sekarang, dan di Haiti baru saja terkena gempa Agustus yang lalu, dan dia juga sudah menceritakan bagaimana hal-hal yang dilakukan, khususnya ini post-earthquake recovery phase. Ya. Jadi kalau di California sudah masuk dalam disaster risk management, di Haiti most on a post-earthquake recovery, di mana ada usaha-usaha untuk paling tidak pertama melakukan juga kajian bangunan, building assessment, and then try to do retrofitting afterwards, of course, as the outcome. And of course, training engineers is something that needs to be done, especially with the social workers as well. So combine, memadukan antara insinyur-insinyur dan juga para social worker untuk membantu mereka yang sedang terdampak gempa. Dan kemudian satu hal lain adalah menggunakan aplikasi Kobo. Kita bisa cari di internet apa itu Kobo, tetapi Kobo sudah dilakukan oleh UN agencies untuk melakukan pendataan bangunan. So the Kobo application has been done by UNESCO and all others UN agencies to see building assess quite details after seismic or earthquake in the areas. So terima kasih sekali Pak Kit. Sorry suaranya terputus-putus, tetapi I hope we can. Tetapi kita harap bisa mendapat sesuatu. I hope we can get something. The next speaker is a person, a lady, Liva Sresta. She's a lead structural engineer of Build Change Asia Pacific. She has had more than 14 years of experience doing retrofitting and confined masonry and all others. And Build Change is of course an NGO specialized in structural and of course construction for the people hit by earthquake. I think you could explain more about Build Change, Liva, but today, of course, Liva is going to present us with also practices and also how and what to do in terms of earthquake emergency and disaster preparedness, response and recovery. The time is yours for the next 30 minutes, Liva.
Thank you, Pak Victor. Warm greetings to everyone here today. My name is Liva and I'm the lead engineer for Asia Pacific at Build Change. My presentation today is on the role of professional engineers in earthquake emergency or disaster preparedness, response and recovery. I will be speaking mainly based on my experiences working as a professional engineer on the reconstruction efforts after the Gorkha earthquake in Nepal in 2015. Next, please. Before we start, just a quick introduction to Build Change. We are an international nonprofit social enterprise, was founded in 2004 in Denver, USA. We currently have programs in Colombia, Guatemala, Haiti, Indonesia, Philippines, and Nepal. Our mission is saving lives in earthquakes and windstorms by empowering people in emerging nations to build homes and schools that will protect their families and children. Next, please. Well, Nepal is a small country adorned by the beautiful Himalayan mountain range. However, this beauty comes with a price. The Himalayan region is one of the most seismically active places on Earth. Nepal has a long history of destructive earthquakes, and according to a study by UNDP, Nepal ranks 11th globally in terms of earthquake risk. Next, please. In the spring of 2015, a massive earthquake with a magnitude of 7.8 on the Richter scale struck Nepal. And in the aftermath, more than 10 million houses were damaged, rendering 3.5 million people homeless, and more than 70,000 houses needed retrofitting. And when we look at the housing stock that was affected, about 74% of the housing affected were of rural typology. And more than 95% of the housing stock all over Nepal are not engineered. Next, please. When we talk about the housing sector and disasters, the problem that connects both are substandard housing, which refers to the housing stock that does not meet the safety standards, such as for earthquakes or typhoons. Now, in the immediate aftermath of a disaster, the priority was immediate rescue and relief. At this stage, temporary shelter was prioritized. Assessment of the nature and extent of damages and the losses incurred by the disaster was done. And then comes the recovery phase, where people now start to rebuild houses as permanent housing. And at this phase, people are relatively motivated to invest in safe housing, and donors are also interested in funding and supporting safer housing. However, the effects of the Nepal Gorkha earthquake was more pronounced in the rural villages than the urban centers. People in the rural villages sort of resorted to traditional practices of house construction, and could neither afford hiring an engineer nor felt the need to do so. So experienced structural engineering manpower, willing to work for rural housing and informal settlements at that time was scarce, as the demand in the commercial sector in the urban centers was very high and definitely more financially rewarding. So on the other hand, there was an abundance of fresh graduates and young engineers without much experience, but very enthusiastic and willing to go out in the field. Now, the challenge here was to deliver a housing reconstruction and retrofitting program with very few experienced engineers based centrally, and relying more on the bulk of engineering staff to be young engineers out in the field. Next, please. Now, we consider resilient housing construction to happen in a 6-step value chain. First is information collection, and then information sharing, design works, financing, construction or building, and then reporting. And at each step of the value chain, the focus was on optimizing engineering resources as resources were limited and the demand was huge. Next, please. Before working in any location, it was sort of vital to obtain information about the disaster and its effect, especially on the housing stock. In case of post-disaster situations, the nature of the damages in the building stock, it gives a good indication of the vulnerabilities that existed. And it gives a good understanding of why these buildings collapsed. So it was, this is vital information for engineers, and as it gives them clues on how to design a safe buildings or design a strengthening scheme for these type of buildings. And this had to be done by our central team of very experienced engineers, because it required a lot of engineering judgment on their part. However, before designing the housing intervention, we also had to carry out a housing subsector study that sort of looked at prevalent housing typologies, typical configurations and layouts of buildings, common architectural and cultural preferences, construction materials used, as well as what is locally available in the markets. The study also looked at the skill levels of local builders and common construction practices that were prevalent. We could use our stock of young, enthusiastic engineers to carry out these surveys, with a checklist that was, of course, developed by the central team of more experienced engineers and post-disaster experts. Next, please. Now, once the necessary information was acquired, we were able to design awareness-raising campaigns for safe housing. We implemented information sharing platforms for homeowners and engineers through mobile applications, such as the Surakshit Ghar application in Nepal. We actually also have a similar application called Rumah Aman in Indonesia as well. So these applications provided information on safe construction practices. It provided sort of contact information for builders and information on safe construction techniques, the government guidelines and directives, etc. In addition to the above, we established technical support centers all over the disaster affected locations. Sort of these centers provided safe construction advice to homeowners who wanted to rebuild their houses. The center also provided house designs to homeowner free of cost. Next, please. Now, after a major disaster such as the Gorkha earthquake, thousands of people wanted to build, at the same time. Through the technical support centers, we had to provide designs for new construction as well as retrofits free of cost to thousands of homeowners. But in such a situation, the conventional way of designing each house one-on-one was too inefficient and expensive. There was a need to sort of look for ways of how we can make the designing process faster and more cost as well as time efficient. And that too with the limited professional engineers and a large bulk of the team being very young graduates. The challenge here was how do we achieve this, this type of scale at a time when it was difficult to find professional engineers, willing to travel and live in these rural communities. Next, please. So we did this through a central team, technical team, sort of a central expert team, and a sort of a data management system supported by mobile applications. Now let me take you through how a design request was processed in this system. Now, a homeowner would visit one of the technical support centers where he or she would be provided with information on constructing a resilient house. Now, once the homeowner decides on the type of house and the layout and sort of other details, This information is entered by the support center staff in a mobile application. The mobile application would, at first search in its database to see if it could find a similar house. If it finds it, then the design package will simply be printed out and given to the homeowner. If not, a design request would be sent to the central technical team to sort of create a new design for that homeowner. Now, a design engineer at the central level would then create this design and send it back to the support center, as well as, it would then also be included in the database for future use. So now if another homeowner in future wanted a similar design, it would readily be there in the database, or what we call the design library. So through this system, we provided free of cost design services to more than 7,000 homeowners in a span of 2 years. Next, please. So the design process itself looked as such. The site engineer, who could be a very young graduate and based in the district, would collect information from the homeowner and send a new design request to the system. Now the supervisor at the central level would then look at the request coming in and from all the TSC locations and assign it to design engineers in the team. Now these design engineers would again be professional engineers at the central level. These designs thus produced would then be reviewed by a more sort of experienced engineer and then only forwarded to the design library if approved. If the review, it doesn't approve the review process, then the design is sent back to the design engineer with comments. Next, please. Next, please. Now, the advantages of having this sort of mobile app-based database system was that it was possible to keep the digital tracking of the design process from when the homeowner made the first request to when it was delivered. Now, this allowed us to identify flaws or bottlenecks in the design process and sort of make changes to be more efficient as a team. Reporting templates also could be readily available in a preferred format, so managers sort of did not have to spend too much time creating reports each week. Next, please. Another feature of the system was that the senior management and clients could be given access to a dashboard with desired information readily available at any given time. Next, please. Now that was for new houses. Now, what about for retrofitting? Now, as I presented earlier, 74% of the housing stock that was affected by the earthquake were of rural typologies, like rural traditional houses made of stone and mud mortar. Now, these houses were quite similar to each other, as you can see in the picture. Throughout the earthquake affected areas, these houses were quite similar to each other in terms of their structural system. Next, please. Most of these buildings were 2 stories with an attic. Walls were usually 18 inches thick and made out of stone units in mud mortar. The floor system had a central timber girder beam, which supported the timber joist. These houses usually had a low story height of 2.1 meters, which was quite good for its stability. Next, please. Now we observed that the damages in these houses were also quite similar across the earthquake affected districts. I mean, not surprising, of course, as they all had similar structural systems to start with. Most common damages observed were, sort of delamination of these thick walls, where the inner and the outer width of the walls acts as 2 separate walls and try to, separate during the shaking. Next, please. We also observed a lot of gable wall collapses. Next, please. We also observed a lot of short wall out of plane damages or collapses. And we also saw indications of sort of common, construction practices throughout these affected, earthquake-affected districts. Next, please. Now, since the problems were similar, we could definitely provide a solution that was also similar for most of these houses. We knew that in a post-disaster situation, when the need for retrofitting is very high, the conventional method of preparing a bespoke design was just not feasible. We came up with a retrofit type design, which is one solution fits many sort of situation. The engineering rule checks were sort of defined based on many design iterations of critical design conditions for these sort of houses. A team of experienced engineers at the center produced the design based on various iterations of the building parameters, such as a range of variations in length, breadth, height of the house, range of variations in pier sizes, considering like maximum number of openings in both directions, considering maximum openings in one direction and no opening in the other directions, and such. But the team also carried out lab tests, such as the cyclic shear test, under axial loads, and dowel push-out tests, compression tests, etc. And the results from these iterations were then sort of consolidated to come up with a few key rule checks, which if a house meets, then the design could be considered safe for that house. Next, please. Now, the type design included addressing the deficiencies observed in these buildings, such as fixing the delamination by providing a through connection through the thick walls, providing light gable walls instead of in place of the heavy gables, providing light, sort of beams at the top of the walls at each floor to keep the walls together, providing strong backs to increase the out of plane capacity of walls, providing jacketing or plastering to increase the in-plane capacity of the walls, etc. Next, please. Now, once the design was ready, the type design was presented in a format such that a very young graduate engineer could use it easily in the field, as the design could be readily applied to any building that fulfilled a set of sort of predetermined applicability criteria, which was called the go, no-go criteria. Now, this included, grouping the buildings in terms of a list of criteria, such as building dimensions, existing damages, geotechnical conditions, opening alignments, opening numbers, etc., and applying the same design with, simple rule checks to the ones that pass the criteria. Next, please. Now, in addition to using the type design approach, which enabled thousands of young engineers to use the, sorry, it's playing already. Yeah, so we have a video that sort of shows how the complete retrofitting process. I think the audio is not working.
No audio. Cannot hear anything.
I cannot hear.
So maybe I will just voice over it. So it's basically all the information from the house is sort of collected in the mobile application. Please play the video. I'll just explain it as it goes. So all the information regarding the dimensions, the house dimension, everything is entered in the mobile application. We used an application called FieldSite for this. Now, once the criteria of go no go is checked and the house passes the criteria, then we deem that this house is retrofittable with the type design. Now, the second part is to carry out full measurement of the house. including, position of walls, length of walls, position of and all that information. And it is entered directly into the mobile application. Now, when this mobile application, when this information is synced, when this mobile phone is synced with the computer, it can directly download that data in Excel, which is then sort of connected to Revit using Dynamo programming, which then models the house itself using that information. So it is a very convenient paperless system. So it can also perform technical checks, such as different criteria, such as the spacing of the strong backs, the spacing of the walls and such. And once the design package is completed, if there's any modification that needs to be done, that's discussed with the homeowner and recorded in the drawing itself. And thus the final drawing packages for the retrofitting is produced, including the BOQ, architectural structural drawings and BOQ. Which is then handed over to the homeowners. It contains a full list of BOQs and all the information for the homeowner to start their construction work on retrofitting. And using this system, we could reduce weeks of engineering efforts to half a day of work of a semi-technical person. Now, this greatly reduced the cost of design delivery for us, because now once the type design was set, we did not need to use too much hours of an experienced engineer, and even a young graduate or even a semi-technical person could use this system and produce a design set in a matter of hours rather than days. Next, please. Now, with the help of this system, we provided over 500 retrofit designs to homeowners across 77 municipalities and 19 districts in the high affected zones post-earthquake. Next, please. Now, financing is another important part of the construction value chain. Most of the financing for the reconstruction came from the homeowner's personal saving. The government also provided some financial support to construct a new house or to retrofit as well. Even with the available financing, most homeowners could only construct a small house that they would most likely resort to unsafe expansion in future as they come onto more money or as their family expanded.
Minutes for you. 5 more minutes for you.
Now, in construction, we adapted the design such that the small core house had expansion provisions installed so that they could expand safely in future. Now, in case of retrofits, we made provisions that the house could be retrofitted in an incremental fashion. And this could not be done at that time as the government only allowed full retrofits, as there were no policies in place to support incremental retrofitting. But the reality was that homeowners could not afford to fully retrofit their house in one go. So this, however, has been acknowledged by the government as a learning and next steps for preparing for it. Now, next. Now, construction quality was another important aspect of building a house, and probably the most challenging as well, especially in a post-disaster situation, in a place like Nepal, where the terrain makes accessibility difficult. We had to ensure that there is a sort of good coordination between the field team and the center quality control team, as the sites were scattered and quite far apart. We sort of assistance to over 19,000 homeowners constructing a new house and over 300 homeowners retrofitting. Now, the field team would train local manpower, provide monitoring and supervision, of ongoing construction works and to provide technical backstopping support and advice to homeowners. And the role of the central quality team would be to review the monitoring process, review the monitoring reports provided by the field team, and to ensure that all the sites are moving forward at the expected pace. The central team also can carry out spot checks on random sites to ensure accuracy of the information provided by the field team, also to tackle any technical issues on site that are beyond the capacity of the field engineers. Next, please. Now, we also created a mobile-based for construction quality monitoring, in which every time an engineer visits a site, they record the site progress, site issues, as well as pictures, any pictures. The information is then sent to the internet with the main server so that the central team can do it. Now, the digital platform can also monitor the date and time of the site visit of each engineer, the construction progress at sites, the construction quality issues at sites, and the managers can have a dashboard with all updated information at the fingertips. Next, please. So we have tried technology wherever possible to make our systems more efficient. Now we have a video. I'm not sure whether the sound will work. I don't think the sound is working, but that's, yeah, so let's skip the video for now. So yeah, basically we've tried to use technology wherever possible to make our systems more efficient. And this video is about how we can use artificial intelligence to make systems even more efficient in the post-disaster context. I mean, this is still in the initial testing phase, but it is definitely a tool that we can look forward to using in future disasters. Next, please. So just a few pictures from our retrofitting clients. This is a house in Eklipat. As you can see, we made small changes such as replacing the heavy gable with a light gable connections. Next, please. We sort of provided simple connection improvements in the room, such as using a GI wire mesh to design these sort of connections, which are very cheap, easy to use, easy to train local builders. Next, please. And then, of course, improving connections to existing members, such as members to the wall, roof treatments, and things like that. Next, please. Some before. This is in Siangja Bazaar, Nepal. Next, please. And this is in Besi. This is a before and after picture of a retrofitted house. Next, please. This is an interior of a typical house in Nepal, the type of traditional houses that we retrofitted. Next, please. This is another Kavre. As you can see, most of these houses are very similar in terms of their configuration, in terms of their structural conditions as well. Next, please. Yeah, a few pictures of the builder trainings, please. This is the ring beam installation, the wall. Next, please. This was all done as on the job training for engineers as well as for builders. Next, please. So we come back to the question of how we can make achieving sustainable housing and safe housing at scale, especially after a disaster when resource constraints exist. First and foremost, I think we need to make solutions simple to use and accessible to technical as well as non-technical people, such as the homeowners and builders. Even though engineering work at the back office is inevitable, we do need to ensure that engineering front office is simple and accessible to young engineers, builders, and even homeowners. We must increase the access to financing for constructing safe houses. We need to make the technologies affordable by efficient designs, but also by providing incremental approach to reach safe housing standards. But we also need to reduce the cost of engineering by being more innovative in using technology and other tools to be more efficient in delivering services. Since there are more than 85% of the building stock in Nepal that are of low strength masonry typologies, courses on designing or improving such buildings should be included in the engineering course curriculums. And we also need to ensure that engineering provides solutions and not create bottlenecks in the process of a homeowner achieving a safe house. With that, I conclude my presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you, Liva. We're actually learning and got several knowledge from Nepal earthquake. That was in 2015. Actually, Liva, the Indonesian government the first time sent humanitarian aid to Nepal at that time. So it's good to. I was there, and then of course we can see the damage, and then it's been like 2 or 3 years. We did the capacity building for the Nepalese who were affected by 2015 earthquake. It's a good one, especially from the engineering side. We could learn something that how important is the information and data to start with. Otherwise, you just cannot do anything. So that's a good one. And then of course, the designs include 2 things. First, building new houses, and then the second one, retrofitting traditional houses. Yes, we realized that was the situation in Nepal, that the traditional houses, especially in the rural areas, or even in the nearby Nepal, Kathmandu area, still lots of traditional houses. And then, of course, it's something that we need to learn. Actually, I'm just thinking out loud. Would like to ask more, but I'm a moderator. I'll leave this to the participants about using the automation tools and then artificial intelligence. That's something that could be done more effectively and efficiently, of course, in terms to provide safer buildings. And then the training of engineers again and again. Training of engineers, builders is a must in the earthquake-prone area. So thank you so much, Liva. I myself have lots of questions to ask, but I'm sure that the participants will do as well. Thank you again. And then the third of our discussion is going to be to have from our Indonesian expert. Of course, we are glad to have him as part of our discussion. His name is Professor Iwayan Sengara, and then I'm trying to see and provide what he's the professor at ITB, and then the thing that we could see that he's not just professor, but the first degree is from ITB, and then the rest of the degree in mechanical engineering, and then also environment engineering, and then it's a PhD done in University of Madison, Wisconsin. So I'm sure that you speak English better than I do, Prof. But more than so, I think we could learn from his expertise, not just lecturing in classroom, but also experience as his position as a professor, and then Ketua Umum or Asosiasi Ahli Rekayasa Gempa, the Earthquake Engineering Association, and then also advisor for Himpunan Ahli Teknik Tanah Indonesia, and then many more, anggota Komite Keamanan dan Jembatan dan Terowongan, and then of course, we are glad that he was also the chairman of Pusat Mitigasi Bencana, or Disaster Mitigation Center of ITB, and then also national delegate for an international meeting, Association for Earthquake Engineering, Board of Director, International Institute for Earthquake Engineering, and then Vice Chairman of the developing of earthquake hazard mapping in Indonesia of the Ministry of Public Works, and of course members, core members or Peta Hazard Gempa Indonesia, the Indonesian earthquake mapping, and then of course member of the team of Indonesian ISO SNI on the sorry, there was a point, and then also there's a this is actually the one that we are willing to hear, that peraturan bangunan tahan gempa Indonesia untuk gedung-gedung. So this is the building SNI or ISO for Indonesia. The time is yours, Pak Prof. Wayan. We are glad to hear and then to learn from you more. The 30 minutes is yours.
Okay, thank you, Pak Victor, and also I would like to say thank you for inviting me to this webinar. It's my honor and my pleasure to be here. Okay, this is a good time for me to share some of the accumulated information that I have collected for the last maybe 15-20 years in just this 30 minutes presentation. I would like to present the earthquake resistant design through periodic enhancement of hazard map and building codes particularly. This is based on the response of our previous earthquake disaster in Indonesia, particularly the 2004 Aceh earthquake that devastating many of the buildings in Aceh, and also a series of another earthquake afterwards. So that our seismic hazard map and building codes need to be enhanced. I would like to present just 4 topics here: identification of building vulnerability and its associated risk. This is resulted from response of earthquake damage building in many of earthquake disaster in Indonesia, particularly for Padang. So in this number 2, identification of building vulnerability will be emphasized for the Padang earthquake. We see the disaster risk chain, so to see the role of professional engineers in this regard. And also number 4 is the enhancement of Indonesian seismic hazard map with the follow-up of the building code, how to build resilient communities through update compliance, and also the QA/QC enforcement of building codes and other related efforts. Okay, let us start with the seismicity of the worldwide here. As you can see here, from 1961, probably all of the countries in the world just struggle to mitigate the earthquake disaster due to the occurrence of many earthquakes because of this global earthquake tectonics. And also, as you can see in Indonesia, from the last 50 years, 100 years, many earthquakes just occur. About 2 years, 3 years, there's an earthquake occur. As you can see here, this is the record of from 1964 to 2010, 2005 earthquake that almost all of our island is potential to earthquake occurrence. This is because of the existence of our country due to the plate tectonic of Indo-Australia, Eurasia, and also Pacific plates, and also one is Philippine plates also. So as you can see here, I have been involved in many of the disaster survey from 1992, just when I back from United States. I'm not an earthquake engineer actually at that time, but in front of us there's an earthquake and tsunami in 1992. So we went there to see how the building has been damaged, collapsed. So after that, every 2 years, 3 years, there was another earthquake all over Indonesia, from Flores to Banyuwangi, Liwa, and so forth, with the magnitude is, from 6, 7, even 8, and finally in Aceh 2004, we have a very large earthquake, 9.2, And after that, many of other earthquakes. So finally, in 2018, 3 years ago, we have a liquefaction, maybe one of the largest liquefaction of the century, with magnitude of 7.4. This is just a flashback of how our building in Indonesia has damage and some collapse also. Not only buildings, some infrastructure like bridge, slope, and so forth. This is Nias earthquake in 2005. As you can see, I think very similar to other countries, as also presented by previous speakers in Kathmandu, in Haiti. Also, Indonesia has many building damage, but some of the also traditional building somehow survived through a large earthquake, like what you can see at the very bottom here, bottom left. This is a traditional house with wood structures in the middle, so you can see it's okay. But many of the very traditional houses with no confinement, no reinforcement, as you can see at the bottom here. So this is from Yogyakarta earthquake. It just completely collapsed. And unfortunately, also some engineered building, some government building also collapsed, as you can see in this picture. Some liquefaction also occurs, some slope stability, some slope fails. And some road also during the, this is the Padang earthquake in 2009. As I can record, some of the road cannot function because of the slope stability issue. And this is the last 2018. We have a large liquefaction. So this is some of the maybe building on the liquefaction potential area is need to be limited, because we cannot stand maybe a building on top of a liquefied area like this. Okay, let me share the identification of building vulnerability and its associated risks. This is rather a response of earthquake in 2009, Padang earthquake, where our interest here is well, this is some research and some response of earthquake engineer to deal with the building damage, and how we propose improvement of building quality for new construction. As you can see here, actually in any earthquake occurrence, the building will respond to various level of probability of damage, from slight, moderate, extensive, and complete, depending on the shaking itself, and also depending on the vulnerability of each building, and also various types of building, from non-engineered building to concrete or engineered building. So several post-earthquake disaster surveys had been conducted in Indonesia, and showed that the collapsed building were mostly non-engineered building, but some engineered building also consisting of 1 or 2 story, also we found experience damage and even collapse. So this is due to poor structural quality of the building. So based on the surveys and evaluation in the field, many building structure did not meet the earthquake resistant requirements. So we found the certain, so depending based on our survey, like the reinforcement not satisfied the requirement on the detail and so forth. So other contributing factor also is the lack of the subsurface data, surface condition, and the type of foundation, and its dimension and local topographical condition also contribute to the damage. So this is the post-earthquake survey of 2009. Total of almost 4,000 buildings were surveyed at that time in the Padang and Pariaman region. These comprise a range of type, which include medical facilities, and also school or educational buildings, commercial building, and residential structures. The survey work also entailed 1,700 interviews with the residents, and then building of all categories were damaged, and nominally engineered structure also suffered significant damage. As you can see on the right here, looks like the building is okay, but actually this building experienced soft story, and one of this story is just gone. This is actually some of the engineered building that we consider is totally damaged. Observation revealed poor structural configuration, poor detailing of reinforcements, and the use of low quality construction materials. So at that time, we are from ITB at the time, collaborate with the Indonesian Association for Earthquake Engineers, ARGI. We collaborate with the BNPB and the support of our aid, and the University of Andalas involved in mobilizing the engineering students to survey these buildings. We also do some tagging, like what Mr. Miyamoto conducted in Haiti. I think we have a red, yellow, and green tag for many buildings. But more than that, we identify the particular damages of the building to have a more information of the building. So we identify the reinforced concrete building, confined masonry building, non-masonry like this, and even also unreinforced masonries. From those 3,000 to 4,000 buildings that we have surveyed, many of the building is just intact like this, so it's completely undamaged. So this is a good news for Padang earthquake of magnitude of 7.6. We see it's only minimal or even undamaged building like on the right here. So this is represented what we consider the codes, and also the good quality building is experienced here, is applied. Okay, this is a message actually to our engineers. Well, this is might be difficult for many of you to understand. This is the MMI, the modified Mercalli intensity. This is like a peak ground acceleration with the damage index. So this is the percentage of potential damage of building that we have surveyed. We come up with 9 benchmark damage model that we can use this model to predict what is going to happen with the existing building if we have a quick shaking of various MMI. So this can be used for disaster risk assessment for buildings to see how vulnerable is the building to potential damage. So we have submitted this to BNPB. So I think this is one of the results that we contribute to the Indonesian emergency response for future potential earthquake, so that we have idea on how we going to assess, or how we going to retrofit some of the essential or vulnerable building. This is the result that we have identified here. Is some of them are indirectly related to how our building codes or seismic hazard map evolved. So in 1989 to 2002, our earthquake is 2009. So many of the existing building was actually designed by our previous 2002 codes. Some of the building, I think, designed based on the 2002 seismic building codes. As you can see, some of the building is relatively new, and we didn't see any a lot of damage, very minimal damage. So so this is a successful, we consider a successful practice. If we could, satisfy the building codes and also do quality control and quality assurance of our buildings, then we can save a lot of life. Let's just go through this. This is called disaster change, and how we deal, how we scientists and also the engineers deal with the disaster to come up with recommendation on or the the activities, how we reduce the potential disaster through disaster risk reduction management plans. I think the role of the professional engineer is here. I think this one. Where seismic building codes, engineers are involved also in that. And on the bottom here and the left, seismic hazard mapping, research, and so forth. Probably that is a domain of the research institution and also universities to work together with the engineer to come up with good practice so that none of this chain will break. So that's the idea here. So let's now go to enhancement of Indonesian seismic hazard map. First Indonesian hazard map had been developed by Baker Carter in bilateral cooperation between Indonesia and New Zealand in 1978. So at that time, the knowledge of the seismic hazard mapping also not yet developing well. But later in 2002, there was an update of Indonesian hazard map, particularly developed for building codes of 2002. So there's a team of Indonesian expert who developed the map based on the most recent methodology and current knowledge up to the 2002. And then just a little bit of story, there was a roundtable discussion during first International Conference of Earthquake Engineering and Disaster Mitigation organized by RG in 2008 on the unification of there was different maps actually before the 2000 still up to 2002 there was so before 2008 there was a map for building, the different map for bridges, different map for dams. So this is somehow we consider need to be this map need to be unified because the source are the same, the fault are the same, all of the earthquake data are the same. So it's supposed to be the input are the same. So in 2009, a national team established for revision of the seismic hazard map of Indonesia. So this team finally successfully developed 2010 Indonesian seismic hazard map. Later on in 2017, a new 2017 Indonesian seismic hazard map has been also developed, led by Professor Isam. So it has been produced and published. So this is I will be very quick on this because it's a lot of detail here. So I don't want to go into details. Just a flash on the overview on the process. So this all the data that we have collected, I think from 1900 to 2016. There was 52,000 earthquake data of magnitude higher than 5, and we use the most recent methodology and ground motion predictive equation to come up with seismic hazard map with methodology similar to I think what USGS, United States Geological Survey, use for the United States seismic hazard map. And as you can see here, this is the evolution of our seismic hazard map from 1983, 1987. So this is a written period. I mean, this is also associated with the risk, with a 10% probability of accident in 25 years. So the risk for this map is actually a written period of the 200 years. In 2002, as I already mentioned, The risk is actually increased. The return period is 475 years. So that means we try to increase the risk of the probability of occurrence, probability of accidents of potential earthquake that will hit our buildings. While the development in seismic hazard map, particularly in United States, that we refer, that increased the return period up to 2% probability of accident in 50 years. So the return period is equivalent to almost 2,500 years. So then the risk is reduced. Further in 2017, in our Indonesian seismic hazard map, we keep using that. But later on in the seismic building code, I will inform you on the development of the building codes with reference to International Building Code of the United States. So this is the process of refining our map. So finally we have and also we adapt ground motion predictive equation. The most recent, I think the most recent is 2015 here. Our map is 2017, so it's pretty new. So this is the most current map that we recommend for the Department of Public Work for buildings, for dams, and for bridges, Okay, let's go to how this seismic hazard map is accommodated in seismic building codes to have a better design of our building, our bridge, our dam, our port. Particularly for buildings, ATC 40 Applied Technological Council performance-based design actually require the damage control, limited safety, and also structural stability level of collapse prevention of the building. So our code is actually also involved satisfying this requirement. The 2017 map that we have generated, we have developed, was adapted for the 2019 Indonesian seismic building codes to satisfy this requirement. So Indonesia became one of the countries, I think, in Asia to follow the international building codes, and we have a map associated with that codes. So let me just go through very quickly how our building code evolved from 81, 83, this is 89, 2002, 2012, and then finally 2019, with reference to American Society of Civil Engineers 716, which is also referred by International Building Codes of 2017. So I forget the year. This is rather technical. So our building actually need to be designed with uniform ridge. Previously, the 2002 building code is based on the hazard-based spectra. The hazard is uniform, but actually the risk is different. So we follow Indonesia follow the United States development in building codes of the IBC or SCA 710, and then finally the ICE 716. So we come up with the current Indonesian seismic building code of 2019. So we hope that with these codes, if we comply with these codes, we are hoping that our building will be less vulnerable. So that will require a lot of effort and a lot of involvement of professional engineer. So this is only from some of the process. How do we enhance our building code with some parameters related to the this is the site condition, how the geotechnical data need to be used for developing or proposing parameters related to design spectra like this. Here we have, I just make 3 case here for Padang City, Banda Aceh City, and Jakarta. How the building codes has helpful and increase the requirement of the design response spectra for building particularly. So as you can see, the green one is 2002, blue one is 2012, sorry, and the red one is 2019. So Padang increased, Banda Aceh increased, Jakarta also increased. Well, even if we compare with the previous 1983, even for low-rise building from, let's say, 5 to 10-story building, so the requirement is just significantly increased. So if you come back to this risk chain, the role of professional engineer here is the dissemination. We need to, our designer, our consultant need to understand. We need to master the building codes, and then do the building design. And also related to this is the building compliance or permits. How do we enforce the building designs to provide the permits so that the design of the building design, the building proposal has satisfied the building requirement. And then with the construction supervision, so we hope we do a lot of disaster risk reduction. This is the experience of Jakarta City. There is a advisory committee establishment for review process of the building design. This is under regulation of in 2002. So this is in general the process showing. So the engineer should have has to have a PE certificate from the association, and also PC license from the government, from the local government. And the advisory team will review the building design and recommend to the municipality to have the permit after all of the requirement has been satisfied. And also some of the other codes that need to be satisfied for the building permit for the new construction. So there were associated rates has been done in Indonesia, and also some other reduction effort. As you can read here, it has been identified that many existing building and infrastructure in Indonesia is considered to have various level of vulnerability and associated disaster risk. While the risks are actually accumulated through past construction with evolving hazard map and building codes. So we need to have disaster risk reduction effort so that from different institutions, including the engineer, how do we contribute to this risk reduction process.
2 more minutes for you, Pak. 2 more minutes.
Okay. Let me just conclude with the. This is another effort of identifying what is the disaster risk, earthquake disaster risk of many many districts in Indonesia. As you can see here, a lot of red. So red mean high risk, yellow, orange, medium risk, and green is low risk. So most of the area in Indonesia are high risk to seismic disaster, and this is the potential fatality. So based on our survey, we identify the number of fatality from Padang City, Banto, Yogyakarta, and also many earthquake fatality in Indonesia, and then we come up with prediction of fatality. And as you can see also for the whole Indonesia, Java is the most vulnerable, the most potential risk of high fatality rate. So let me conclude. 2 minutes, yeah. Okay, that's about right. Seismic building and infrastructure code for Indonesia has evolved over the last 3 decades. Recent seismic spectral design load requirement for building and infrastructure for new construction in Indonesia are in general directed toward in line with many international building codes. So this increase is actually will tend to expose many buildings and infrastructure to be higher level of vulnerabilities and risk. As you can see just now, preliminary vulnerability building damage models have been developed, and this can be used for identifying the potential damage or potential risk of existing building in many cities or many districts in Indonesia. So I would like to highlight how the professional engineer play significant roles in this reduction process. Well, what is the essential effort to prevent or to minimize building infrastructure collapse for future earthquake? This is through provision of proper engineering design parameters. So this is the challenge of professional engineers to update their knowledge to have most up-to-date knowledge for proper engineering design parameters, and also improvement of continuous update. Yeah, so that's I already mentioned in detail. Well, the code shall later be legally referred and embedded within the local regulation. This is also important. We have a map, we have codes, but it is not referred legally in the local regulation, so that will not going to be effective. Well, proper design, good quality construction, building and design enforcement with the building authority, not only Jakarta or any big city, but every cities that potential to having earthquake disaster. So need to have this advisory committee. I think now Indonesia will in very soon will apply what we call the TPA, Team Professional Ahli. What is in English a professional expert team, something like that. Then a systematic and good construction supervision, of course. Finally, with disaster risk assessment of buildings, demand development of continuous enhancement of building and infrastructure vulnerability model to in the future we keep updating the potential of the vulnerability of buildings so that we can do some higher quality construction with the retrofit of vulnerable and essential building. So that's conclude my presentation. Thank you very much, Pak Victor.
Thank you, Professor Wayan. It's again looking from the Indonesian side based on experience, and you provide with informations on Padang and 2009, and then the most recent one Palu, but mostly from Padang that we can learn something. It's a nice one that you provide these cycles of 5 chains expected of involvement of professional. That's something that we can learn of: construction, supervision, building codes, building design, dissemination and training, and then seismic building codes. And that's why your Professor Wayan presentation, we can see that it's based on this evidence, and then also the approach that he has been proposed. Those are the things that we are learning. Of course, the seismic map is an important data to be considered, and therefore the updating of the maps is a must according to Professor Wayan. Yeah, otherwise we are going nowhere, because we don't have really a proven information of all the hazards, especially earthquake. But then as his role, Professor Wayan also explained to us about the evolutions of the building codes, and that's the thing. And then his concern at the last of remarks is how could it be part of the local regulation? Of course, SNI is one thing, but local regulation is another thing, and that's that's something that he has been trying with the Provinsi DKI, with the Provinsi DKI. Yeah, but still it's the building with 8 floors above. Not with the lower one. So thank you again. This is something from the Indonesian side. Professor Wayan explained to us more on the role of the professional, and then of course again I would like to ask many questions as well, Professor, because the good presentation and 30 minutes is not enough. But let's go to the next one. Thank you, Julia. It's early morning in UK, but you are joining this webinar, and we're going to hear knowledge sharing and of course experience from Julia Radcliffe, Master of Engineering, and she's the founding director of Scale Consulting Limited, UK. And not only that, of course, we are glad that we have her here to share the knowledge, because he has worked for major consultancy and leadership roles in the UK and overseas on building ranging from skyscrapers to cultural institution. This is nice. I would like to hear about the cultural institution and international development organization. And of course, we would like to hear, because she is also got some awards from the environmental expert, and then in several industry awards, including RIBA London Structural Steel Awards and the Institute of Structural Engineers International Awards. Okay, Julia, the 30 minutes time is yours.
Well, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me here to talk to you all and to follow such amazing speakers. What I'm going to talk to you about today is the framework that the Humanitarian and International Development Panel of the Institution of Structural Engineers has pulled together over the last few years. So just to start, it was a very nice introduction, but just tell you a little bit about myself. So I'm based in London, and I've worked for almost 30 years as a consulting design engineer. I haven't won all the awards that Victor said. I've been a judge for those awards as opposed to having won them all. But I have been very fortunate to work on an amazing range of projects, both in the UK and internationally. I'm a fellow of the Institution of Structural Engineers, and having worked in New York for several years, I also became a professional engineer in the United States. Alongside commercial practice, I've supported disaster response and development projects in the field, including the Indian Ocean tsunami of 2004 and the Kashmir earthquake of the following year. I've served as a trustee for Architecture of Humanity UK and volunteered design services on projects both in the UK and internationally for various charities and communities. As you noted, I set up my own company as a consultant in 2018. So that's enough about me. And now the development panel. So I'm here representing this panel. It was formed in 2017 by our chair, Tom Newby, and it's made up of members across 4 continents, some of whom work as engineering professionals for non-government organizations and international development organizations, and others within commercial engineering practices. Includes Frankie Ken from your organization, who invited me to speak today. The headquarters of the IStructE is in London, but it has members across the world, with large membership drawn from Australia, Hong Kong, India, and many other countries. So the panel itself, it was pulled together to try and support the membership so that they can act in a professional and responsible way in the development sector and to respond to disasters. It recognises that people's day-to-day work might be very different from the responsibilities that they assume or situations they encounter in these settings. So as part of this panel, we've produced a number of sort of guidance documents for members, but also they're available to people who aren't members as well. So to talk about these particular challenges, we recognise that there wasn't a lot of guidance for professional engineers working in these kind of scenarios. So essentially, this is intended both as a framework for individuals to assess and develop their own competencies, to identify gaps that they might have in their knowledge or experience, and also for organisations and companies who might be asked to support projects, for them to really understand the skill set that they need to do, and also to try and understand perhaps sometimes the unintended consequences of interventions that they might make, so that they can work in the most responsible way, and hopefully as well perhaps partner and support local engineering professionals or practitioners, depending upon where the project might be. In putting together this framework, we drew on the experience of the full panel, and we really thought about areas where it differs from people's day-to-day work. In particular, there were aspects in relation to perhaps working where there wasn't a full suite of design codes. Perhaps the construction market is not professionalized in terms of professional workers, or it might be homeowners building their own shelter, and more simple construction that doesn't always lend itself to engineering analysis, but also recognizing that an engineer, as the only professional within these kind of scenarios, may have to take a lot more responsibility in terms of managing projects and interfacing with finances and also the communities affected, and just recognizing how engineers need to sort of increase their understanding so that they can do that in a responsible way. In putting together these guidelines, what we did was we used the framework of the training model from the iStruct itself and tried to map the additional requirements for working in these kind of scenarios onto the structure that they put together. We did that both because we needed some kind of framework, but also so that people could see it as something that sat very much side by side with their personal and their professional objectives. And on top of that, we referenced a couple of other organisations, including the PHAP, so that's Professionals in Humanitarian Assistance and Protection, and also the International Red Crescent and Red Cross, because they talk very much about how professionals need to work in situations where you may have very vulnerable communities. So that's the background of how we did it. And then to reflect the iStruct terminology within their codes, they use these 4 terms: appreciation, knowledge, experience, and ability. And that's quite a good way just to sort of set the level of expectation in terms of competency. So there's some things you may not have experience in, but you need an awareness in so that you can work properly in these kind of environments. So the document is there and it's available online, and rather than go through step by step, which probably is too much at this stage in the proceedings, what I want to do is just go through a couple of example pages just so that I can explain how the setup works and how it relates to the training or the development for individuals. So in terms of recognizing that often people are asked to work in an unfamiliar location or jurisdiction, it's encouraging people to look at what is available for the individual country, look at guides that might sit beyond where they would normally source information, and to try and connect with whatever professional institutions or organizations that might exist within that jurisdiction. Like I said, I'm sorry that the text is small, but hopefully it's not necessarily intended that everyone takes on everything. This is all available online. And then the other matter is in terms of communication, just really understanding and really thinking about how you engage with other people, and recognizing that even speaking professional to professional, they may use different terminology. You know, if you're thinking about here in North America, you might be using different units. And it's just making sure that people are really just having that awareness. I think sometimes when you work in the bubble of your own country or your own sort of region, you know, it's very easy to fall into assumptions as to how people communicate both technical and non-technical issues. The second broader theme is about your responsibilities. And what we've done here is we've got the baseline requirements from the core objectives. In this case, we split it into two. We recognize that you've got engineering responsibilities and things that are very familiar and we feel very comfortable in terms of analyzing things and testing things and doing all our sums. But there's also, you're quite likely going to have project responsibilities, and that might even include developing what the brief is and working with people to really understand, and perhaps also project management responsibilities. And then this is one as well from a technical perspective that often comes up or presents challenges is materials. Often you're working with materials that may not have any kind of codes, or the sourcing of the materials may not have any kind of regulation. So how do you responsibly work within those frameworks? And what we've done here is that it's not a comprehensive training manual, but it's more just sort of saying, this is what you need to be aware of, and this is how you might approach it. And then the third example is a whole series of considerations that sits completely outside the current framework for engineering training and professional development within the iStruct, and talks about the wider responsibility of you working as a representative of an NGO, or working with communities that might be very vulnerable, and encouraging people to really understand the wider implications of working in the sector, and how you can effectively try to do the best good, and understanding different power balances that exist within these kind of situations. So that's a little bit of a race through. Like I said, the intention is, hopefully, if this is of interest, is that it's something that you can look up and take a look at. Like I say, all of this is open source, and it's very much, you know, if an organization wants to sort of take it and adapt it for their own particular use, we'd be very welcome for that to happen. It's about supporting other engineers to do the best work that they can. So finally, here we have some of the links that already exist through the iStruct website. So there's information that exists there already. And then coming up, there'll also be, as a companion to this professional development framework, we're putting together some further guidance, which will direct people to specific resources that would help them develop through independent learning, how they can develop their skills and knowledge in some of the areas that we've identified. Of particular interest to you guys on this sheet as well might be the EFIT report. So EFIT at the bottom there, that is an organisation that sits within the Institution of Structural Engineers, and they do a lot of post-disaster earthquake analysis. They'll go to sites and do analysis of damage that's caused and how it might be prevented in the future. So there's a very active group there that runs within the Institution of Structural Engineers. So there you go. So that was less than 30 minutes, but really it was just intended to show you what we've developed, why we've developed, and hopefully it's a resource that is quite useful for institutions, but also individuals to really sort of understand how they might want to develop themselves so that they are prepared if they are likely to be responding to a disaster scenario or supporting development projects in their own jurisdiction or even beyond. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. This fourth presentation is it's a good combination from the first one on more from Dr. Kit Miyamoto, and then also from Liva in Nepal perspective, and Professor Wayan, the Indonesian case of trying to develop rules and regulations and standards. But this one is actually equipping professional engineers to do the best work. That's I mean, I quote from Julia, to do the best works. And this is more like a non-structural approach of well, a soft approach of doing professional engineering. And then we're glad to hear this, because Julia also mentions about trying to submit our compliance to the code of conduct and other accountability guidance. And then that means to make the works of professional engineers, especially when we deal with humanitarian works, to be proper, fit, and suit with the context and the conditions of the works where we may do our things. And of course, again, thank you so much. This is something that we can learn, and I'm so much interested to all of this for presentation. But there are two panelists that I would like to introduce. I mean, of course, they don't need to be introduced anymore, because they're the organizer and they know the things. The first panel is Pak Habibi Razak, Engineer Habibi Razak, IP and Tech Engineering, Head of Transport, Resources and Energy of SMC Indonesia. You are going to present your response in 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, and also Frankie Ken, Managing Director of PT Miyamoto International, will do the same for all the four resource person. The 15-minute times is yours, Pak Habibi.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I would like to request Pak Frankie to start first as a panelist, and then later on continue with me. I only have 2 to 3 minutes.
Okay. Okay, Pak Frankie.
Yes, thank you, Pak Habibi, for the time, and because I will have questions for all of the speakers, except for Dr. Miyamoto, obviously, because he's in Haiti. So I'm going to deliver this my comments and questions in English for the benefits of that, and I believe that our audience would not have a problem with that. So I am connecting the dot with our previous webinar last month, where one of our speakers, Sasa Popovic, mentioned that PE should be at the apex of practical engineering activities. So in the pyramid of that engineering activities, the PE is at the top of it. Now we heard from Dr. Miyamoto that in earthquake, disaster preparedness and response, the role of PE is even more urgent, with detailed tasks, including surveying, retrofit, repair design, supervision of the work, cost estimation, training the trainer, and even engage funding. And in California, they have been doing this since 1975. And now, as shared by Julia, acknowledging PE in disaster preparedness and response context is even more demanding and more complex, more complicated. ISTRAC-E even created a framework to develop engineering skills to work in such contexts. So from Dr. Miyamoto, Liva, Prof. Wayan, and Julia's stories, in earthquake, all of the above have to be done massively, quickly, and accurately. Now, my question for Liva, how did you do it in Nepal? You were talking about optimizing the resources. How did you do? What did you actually do? What did you actually optimize in your resource? And how many engineers did you train, and how long did it take you to do that, to complete the whole thing? And questions for Prof. Wayan. How do we do this in Indonesian context, sir? How do we train the PE and the engineers in training? When you said that almost all the islands and the cities in Indonesia is subject to large earthquake, and you mentioned before most of the well, I gathered that most of the building stocks in Indonesia is built probably using the code from 1987, which was with return period of 200 years. So, which is a very low compared to what it is now, the new building code. And finally, question for Julia. why is ISTRAC-E creating the framework for HID? I mean, ISTRAC-E is from UK, there is no earthquake there. So what is ISTRAC-E's own plan to implement it internationally? And what the PEE or Indonesia can learn from the ISTRAC-E experience and train the PEs here in this context? So that's a bit lengthy, but I'm willing to repeat them again if you, for any specific ones.
Okay, thank you, Pak Frankie. So I'll just go ahead with Pak Habibie before the response of the resource persons.
Okay, thank you, Pak Frankie, for starting the discussion, yeah, through the question and answers later on. Okay, we have 4 speakers this afternoon, and they all presented very nice presentation. It's actually a knowledge, new knowledge for all the Indonesian engineers, yeah, who attend this webinar. Started from Dr. Kit. Dr. Kit already explained the guides to earthquake safety based on the experience of California as well as other countries. We know that Dr. Kit is now in Haiti dealing with the earthquake emergency and disaster preparedness. Yeah, I mean the emergency situation. Yeah, issues. The second one from Liva, that she presented the mobile application and Revit tools to speed up the design and construction of the new housing post earthquake, as well as the retrofitting of the existing houses affected by the earthquake. That's nice. Later on we can have questions on that. And the third speaker, Prof. Wayan, presented the ATC 40 performance-based design. He mentioned also the disaster risk reduction management plan. Actually, professional engineers involved earlier in the design stage to make sure that the design in compliance to specification for standard. Yeah, for sure we have SNI Gempa that we need to follow. And then later on, we go to the construction supervision. This need to be supervised also by a professional engineer. And later on, if the earthquake is happening, occurring, then we have a kind of earthquake emergency planning and response and recovery, something like that. And from Julia, she explained a lot about the framework to be a professional engineer, yeah, for humanitarian work in international development. So this is quite interesting. In terms of continuing professional development initiated by the Institution of Engineers Indonesia, this is quite relevant what we have. So my questions will be 2 questions only. The first question, actually, this is quite technical. When we do the damage assessment post-earthquake, do we have a certain reference that we need to refer to, whether we have ASCE or Standard Nasional Indonesia, Prof. Wayan? So how to determine the damage criteria? So whether the criteria is low, medium, major, or catastrophic. And then what would be the proposed rectification? If the proposed rectification is just to rebuild the house, or just to do kind of retrofitting. So this one we need to be clear. Which one will go to retrofitting? Which one should go to rebuild? And the second one, I think particularly for Julia, yeah, in UK, when we are a professional engineer, is there any kind of requirement to submit a continuous professional development every year, a kind of report to make sure that we keep improving our knowledge and experience in the area of engineering? Here in Indonesia, the PE license needs to be renewed every 5 years. So the CPT should be reported at least once a year to make sure that everybody keeps doing their professional development in order to maintain the PE license. Okay, I think that's it from me, Pak Victor.
Okay, I think, both from Pak Frankie and Pak Habibie already response and exploring questions. From Frankie, of course, we cannot, we cannot have Pak Kit Miyamoto to answer it, but of course, Liva, Professor Wayan, and Julia can respond to the 3 questions. One questions each from Frankie, and also 2 questions from Pak Habibie, more on for Professor Wayan and Julia. Okay, I'll start with probably now backwards, from Julia first.
Good, because then I won't forget the questions. I think my answer in some ways will pick up part of both Frankie and Habibie's questions. So when the Humanitarian International Development Panel was formed, there wasn't one before. So essentially what we wanted to do was talk amongst the panel in terms of what is the most useful way that we can support the membership. And I think initially we sort of started, everyone's like, oh, well, I found this great paper on bamboo, and I've got this great example here, and look at these drawings. But actually we recognized what was more important was preparing people so that they can have the skills and the knowledge that they can prepare answers and prepare solutions that are absolutely contextual, both contextual in terms of the geography and the physical environment, but also the cultural and systematic environment that the project you're doing is going to be. And what we recognize is that there's a huge amount of interest in individuals, especially often at the beginning of their career, to work on these kind of projects, to do good, to make their engineering have positive impact. What we felt was that so many of the training situations, they very much focus on things about the built output, and what the individuals on the panel found through their careers was that they didn't know what they didn't know. And what we felt was most useful was for us to try and paint a broader picture of the whole setting in a place where you might be the only professional working in that stage. And as such, you need to take more responsibility. There may not be an architect, there may not be contractors who have the level of competency that you're used to working with. There may not be materials that are certified, but you can still do good stuff. So it's about trying to instill, try so that there aren't surprises when you're in the field, and that people draw down on their first principles knowledge and their engineering sense and knowledge, and apply that. What we found, or people had a number of stories about situations where designers, perhaps from the UK or other sort of Western nations, they have the best intentions, but perhaps they apply their own design sensibilities into the wrong environment, and it can actually do more damage than it can good. So we felt the most use, because we're a sort of group of volunteers, was actually to prepare people and to try and prepare people for taking an approach to being very strategic about where they add value, where they need help, and think of it more as a collaborative piece as opposed to coming in as, the designer superhero. So tied into that is the answer to Habibie's question about, very specifically about damage assessment and earthquakes. So We aren't currently providing that kind of prescriptive advice. We are talking more about how you might go about it, and in due course we'll be directing people towards frameworks that people might want to use for those kind of assessments. So that's very much not where we feel we add best value. What we want to do is make sure that people understand how the role differs, and then direct people to other organizations who are doing lots of really good work in that space. Okay, so that's hopefully an understanding of what we're trying to do. And in some ways it feels very sort of tenuous, but I think people who've worked in the sector who read it go, yes, actually that's something that is useful. No one has described this before. And then the second question Habibi had was about continuous professional development and registration in the UK. So just as background, the registration process in the UK and the US is very different. I happen to be registered in both, so I can see the differences. So within the US, as a professional engineer, you are registered with an individual state, and you effectively take personal responsibility for the design of a building structure, in the case of a structural engineer. In the UK, chartership is a professional qualification, but it's currently within England. It's slightly different in Scotland, but in England, the responsibility for the design is taken by a practice. So you are not obliged to be chartered in order to work and operate as a professional. However, it is the recognized standard, and you would be very hard, and it's seen as a point of personal professional status, although it is not a legal requirement. Insurers sometimes like it to happen. However, to maintain that status and for me to carry the initials after my name, I am required to submit annual continuous professional development. And there is a sort of, it's effectively self-certified. So I explain, I don't need to provide certificates. I explain what I've been doing, the value that it's brought me, and the equivalent sort of time in terms of training. This year, they have now put in some compulsory parts in relation to health and safety in support of missions there. But otherwise, the assumption is, provided it's relatively broad and relevant to the work that you're doing, then it would be deemed satisfactory. I would note that in terms of professional engineers and the United States, the state that I'm registered in, so that's Connecticut, does not require that submission, but each state has its own requirements. So hopefully, so the answer to your question is yes, I do submit annual logs of my status, of my training to maintain my status.
Okay.
Does that answer the questions?
Yeah, sure. It
Okay,
answers
great.
all the questions.
Okay, Pak Frankie and Pak Bibi, it's time for you, Professor Wayan, to respond to Pak Frankie and Pak Habibie.
Okay, thank you, Pak Frankie, and also Pak Habibie. I think Pak Frankie captured some of the main aspect that I have presented here, and the one of the question or comment is how do we disseminate the hazard map and the building codes? Well, this is a good question. Actually, last month, we have conducted dissemination of the seismic hazard map and also the building codes to civil engineers through a collaboration of Department of Public Work and also the authority of DKI Jakarta. So this is related to how these building codes need to be understood by the engineers, because that is the length. So we have a good building code, let's say, but if this building code is not disseminated to the engineers, and then the process of disaster risk reduction is not so like one of the chain is missing there. So there's a big impact on the our new construction. So we have activities of conducting the dissemination. So many of the experts who developed the map and also the team who involved in the member of the seismic building codes present the process and also the item of each element of the building codes to be generally in general to be understood. Because one the dissemination process and is not sufficient. So actually this dissemination process or training need to be conducted further in the future to have the all of the new design requirement, particularly related to the earthquake resistant design and construction, need to be understood by the engineer, the professional engineer. So the recommendation also is for the related associations and also the PE, the professional engineer is to have the license for the professional engineer to to involve in the process of understanding the new building codes. So I think in the future we need to do further dissemination. One time is not enough. But the good thing is the last dissemination, 2,000 of engineer or professional civil engineers attended the dissemination. So yeah, this is also maybe because of the during the pandemic, people is the engineer would like to just stay home. So it's really easy for the engineers now to have this kind of information just by the Zoom webinar like this. I think is need to be more intensively conducted. Yeah, maybe Pak Victor from the USA could have initiative to do further, dissemination of this. Okay, that's and also important to have training for trainers for the earthquake resistance construction. We actually have experience in conducting training for trainers for the builders, for the masons, and how the guidelines of the earthquake resistance housing to be disseminated to the masons. That is also one of the bottom, go to the community-based training for trainers could be sponsored by the institution or the Department of Public Work, and also some of NGO involved. After Padang earthquake, there was training for trainers for that, and also after the Yogyakarta earthquake, some NGO sponsored that. So this is very effective. So not only that, I think the building codes dissemination is also, could be disseminated maybe several weeks or months after the disaster. From Pak Habibi, yes, we have a guidelines for assessing the tagging. Well, actually, in our the one that I presented, we have two types of building assessment, building damage assessment. One is for the assessment for the emergency response. So for many buildings that has have various degree of level of damage, we need to identify through three category, like what have been presented by I think Imamoto and also Dr. Liva, yeah. So by red, if the building has a significant structural damage, so you just directly put it red. So this building has to be demolished and newly constructed. So the second one is actually if a building has or the housing has just non-structural damage or very minimum structural damage, we put it yellow. So this building need to be just but yellow cannot be function directly, but needs assessment further whether it's going to green or going to red. So the other one is if there's no damage, then it's green. So the guideline for this is actually we have developed and already put into the guidelines to the BNPB, Indonesian emergency agency, disaster agency. Yes, and also in Department of Public Work, we have that guidelines. This is also referred from the Applied Technological Council, the reference. I think it's used worldwide. I forgot the number. So that is the guidelines for that, Pak Habibie. Oh yeah, one more thing. We recommend, we suggest to the BNPB to have many of our engineers to be ready to be mobilized during after the earthquake. So this people is a volunteering activities program that understand the process of evaluating the building damage. So right after the earthquake, as an emergency response, so we mobilize these engineers or personnel that equipped with the knowledge of conducting or be able to conduct the triaging or building assessment. So anytime the earthquake occurs, so they just go right away. But this is not yet implemented.
Okay, so is that it?
Yeah, I think that's it for now. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, yeah. So the last one you mentioned about having a roster of the trained engineers to be deployed at any time of earthquake happen. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Pak. All right. Now Liva, responding to Pak Frankie and Pak Habibie.
Thank you, Pak Frankie and Pak Habibie for the questions. So for Frankie's question on how do we optimize the resources, so we did that using the various technology, like using mobile applications, using Revit tools, so that the engineering, the hardcore engineering is done at the back end, but at the front end there's the sort of a front where engineers can use that tool to sort of give retrofitting solutions to homeowners. So, and that's one way how we did it. Another is also, as I discussed, in the TSCs, where we use the data management system. So similar sort of designs didn't have to be done repeatedly. So we could sort of use the designs that are already been done, and then we could sort of search that up when a similar design is requested by the homeowner. So those are the ways that we use technology to sort of optimize engineering time used in giving solutions post-disaster. Using the systems, we managed to train 1,720 engineers in classroom sessions. We trained 649 engineers on the job. So we created we built in each district, we built a model retrofit, which would be used as a front to train the engineers as well as the builders. And this was important because before the earthquake, retrofitting was not really a thing that was done. It was relatively new, not just for homeowners, but also for engineers. They have heard of it. They've theoretically sort of read about it, but they've never actually seen a retrofit being done or implemented a retrofit for most of the engineers post-disaster. So it was important for us to organize an on-the-job training also for engineers, not just for design, but also for implementing the design and how, there's so many different factors when it comes to retrofitting. It's not as straightforward as new construction. So we did that. We also trained 1,516 builders on the job, as well as on the job for builders, all of them. Yeah. And just, I would like to add a little bit on what Julia mentioned about the design process needs to be collaborative. And I can completely relate to that, because we worked with a team of engineers from Bay Area, California, to sort of come up with the retrofit design and also other designs for stone masonry houses. And it was, I think, such a learning process for both teams, because they could sort of, learn how to adapt to the situation, the scarcity of information, the scarcity of skills, the scarcity of materials out in the field. And sort of our team here, the local Nepali engineering team here, could sort of get a fresh perspective from a team that is, working from the Bay Area. So I think it was a very good sort of win-win situation for us. And I think it's a very important process, because we've seen, like, post-disaster, a lot of technologies, a lot of different interesting designs being implemented, but unsuccessfully because of, those systems not being localized enough. So I think that's definitely a very important aspect that Julia pointed out. That's it.
All right. Thank you, Pak Frankie and Pak Habibie.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Wow. With that many trained engineers, thousands and also builders, I think what Pak Wayan suggests to BNPB, we need to invite Build Change come back to Indonesia, ya Pak ya. They train that many.
We'll be happy to.
Yeah, they train that many thousands of engineers and also builders. We need those kind of people to come, and then at least to do it. Build Change office in Bandung years ago. I was there then and try to discuss with the World Economic Forum. But hopefully we could do the thing. Yeah. Thank you, Liva, for sharing. It's a good one with the numbers. It's encouraged PII to train professional engineers and can work with any other donor agency to provide this disaster engineering. And we know at least someone, an expert, Pak Wayan, Professor Wayan, could be the advisor or trainer for this project if things can happen here. Collaborations of Build Change and PII, yeah, Pak Habibie. I'm just thinking out loud, and then it could be done. I mean, because Professor Wayan says something. All right, there are two questions already here from the audience. First one, I think it was the questions from Pak Parvianto. He actually quite asked this question at the time. Kit Miyamoto shared the presentation. The question is, I wonder all the regulation prepared by government, sponsored by engineer society, or solely by government. So I think this question is quite connect with Professor Wayan presentation. So Professor Wayan, I wonder all the regulation prepared by government, sponsored by engineer society, or solely by government. That's the first question. If you could explain it, Professor Wayan.
Directly now, or wait for other question?
Yeah, just directly. Go ahead.
Yeah. This is actually I see the development of seismic hazard map and also building codes in Indonesia is in the process of formalizing the good practice. Let's say, like in the United States, for example, the seismic hazard map will be conducted institutionally by United States Geological Survey. But in Indonesia, this process is still initiated by the experts from universities. So initiated by universities, researchers on the subject, from geology, seismicity, and also geotechnical earthquake engineering specialties to come up with the a new methodology and also new data collection from the fault system, the seismicity data, which is we expect that this process is conducted by the institution like geological institution, for example. While they have information for that, but somehow the knowledge on the new methodology is not catch up with the international methodology. So we from university sometimes try to assist that, and in collaboration with our colleagues from the United States Geological Survey and also from other associations from universities also. So fortunately, we come up with a good update of the hazard map and also building code. But I think in Indonesia, this needs to be institutionalized more, so that the government will take the lead on that. Of course, the association, like my association, for example, like Indonesian Earthquake Engineering Association the members contribute significantly in the development of this hazard map and also the building codes. Our colleagues from LIPI, from other universities also, University of Gamada, and so forth, so contribute a lot. So combination of the association, universities, and the government. But I think the role of the government, we would like to be more on this process because this is costly. I mean, need a lot of financial support also with some of the research and data collecting with some of the let's say a meeting process and so forth. So it cannot be the development of this hazard map and building code cannot be, while we are at the universities doing teaching and so forth. So we have only a limited time for that. So we cannot do that. So it has to be more institutionalized.
All right, thank you, Prof. Wayan. If any similar condition in Nepal, Liva, could you share, because this is very important, who is actually the driver or the one that can make this building code happens in terms of regulation? Could you explain a bit about that from the Nepal perspective?
Yes, the entity responsible for building code sort of enforcement is the Ministry of Public Works, and particularly the Department of Urban Development and Building Construction. Our code has been recently revised after the earthquake, and we have a new code, and the code usually has to be it has to be approved by the Senate level to be legally enforced. And the legal enforcement of the code is done through municipalities at the local level. Municipalities, the code is implemented at the local levels through municipalities, rural and urban municipalities. So mostly through urban municipalities. In rural municipalities, still it is not, building code is not fully enforced in Nepal because I would say, and capacity.
Okay, yeah, similar things happen. Pak Parwianto, you asked these questions. Is it? Have you feel that this is enough, Pak Parwianto?
Well, I rather whether I still don't understand because I asked it for the foreign engineer, especially from America. We always adopt American standard, but I don't know whether they, the society of the engineers or the government or their government. That is what I asked for. Because in Indonesia, we know there is a board about using a standard just like euthanasia and something that like that. I just want to express my opinion that it's so many theories from abroad and from the countries, but it's too late to tourists to don't. Especially from fresh graduate. You see, we always make marks theory, but the practice is not so. It's too late about the execution. So I wonder whether all these engineers would like to educate the lowest of the level in engineering. You see, that's all. Sorry, my English is too bad.
Okay, noted, Pak Parwianto. It's I think Professor Wayan already mentions about the collaboration of multi-stakeholders in trying to drive or produce this kind of building codes. And of course, it comes back to for the Indonesian level, it comes back to the kabupaten kota or districts, and not in the national level, because building codes is supposedly accepted in Jakarta for province. For others, that's according to our regulation, yeah, Professor Wayan. But the collaboration is needed in this case, and then
If any of those areas prone to earthquake, we already have a IRBI, Indonesian risk index, and all the subnational government needs to be aware of that. I think Liva was right. The government realized need to at least do something after being hit by one of the worst earthquake. Usually that happened to Indonesia as well. Yeah, when we got hit by disasters, then we realized we need to have something, a policy. Yeah, sorry. The next questions is for Julia. I mean, from Pak Bambang Pri. This is a question for Julia. He was asking, beside code of conduct, how does code of ethics? Okay. Beside code of conduct, how does code of ethics work to ensure the role of PE comply with any norm and standard in terms of the frame you presented? So, beside our conduct, code of ethics, go ahead.
Yeah, no, well, it's a very good question, and what we wanted to do, and this is why it's a framework as opposed to a guide or prescribed, is again, it's this approach as to what's the most appropriate set of design standards to use in any given situation, and recognize that if someone in one country is doing design intended for another location, and if that other location, it's not very clear what the design norms are, it's really important that that research is done, and you know, because, and even sometimes it may be that the institution in that country talks about alignment with the UBC or the IBC or other sets of codes, but the day-to-day practice might be very different. So it's really important to understand how people design in the jurisdiction, or even if there isn't design, what are the common practices? Because ultimately that's how people are going to build it. You might, exactly as Leva said, if you're sort of designing something and the people receiving that don't recognize, say, the detailing or the terminology, that doesn't help anyone. So I'm just going to share my screen quickly because we addressed this approach, or how you might do this.
Go ahead.
An FAQ, a frequently asked question. So what we talk through here is making sure that you understand what the design codes are, but also any regulations, whether or not you need to have an in-country professional engineer validate your work, and understand, and if for a reason there is nothing available, then you should develop your own strategy that is based on international codes such as IBC or Euro codes, but also make sure that you understand that you're applying them correctly. So we talk through that in one of these things, because often an in-country building code, particularly if it's not a particularly developed construction market, it might just cover very simple construction. And it's appropriate that you embrace that and recognize what is there, and then maybe you add on to it, but you need to make sure you're adding on in an appropriate way. So in very simplistic terms, it may be that they don't use load factor design. So you need to make sure that anything you're doing in relation to seismic design, that the output is compatible with the type of design and the type of actions and factors or not factors that are used locally in the country that you're working, or in not even in the country, in the area that you're working, such that the people who will be delivering that work, it is recognizable to them, and you have the greatest chance of a successful outcome. It's very easy to overcomplicate design and then there being a miscommunication. And I think the onus is on you as the designer and as the professional to really think through that and de-risk that at the outset. We talk again about an approach. And I think in particular, you know, thinking about UK engineers in mind, we already said you don't need a professional engineer to sign off on stuff before you go. We're very used to a set of codes that all intersect beautifully. But, you know, having worked in a number of different countries, that's not often the case. And sometimes codes for wind might be borrowed from one country, and there might be something else written down even at government level, but it isn't used. And it's really important in this whole idea about, as Leva said, about try and find someone, your equivalent in that country. It might be someone who is, you know, an academic. It might be someone just to understand how people present their work in the place where you're operating, and then develop a strategy such that it's going to have the best chance of being built in the way that you want it to. And the final point I would make is a lot of scenarios you're looking at are often traditional building techniques where it's as much about understanding a good design and material availability as it is about analysis. You know, ultimately it's a case of making sure that, you know, roofs are anchored, that foundations are anchored, as Leva said, that you're using light construction in the right place. So it's often not all about the codes and the analysis. It's about the right things in the right place and specifying materials and methodologies that are recognizable in the place that you're building.
Okay, thank you, Julia. Is that enough, Pak Bambang? Are you happy with the answer?
Yes, I think so. Yes,
right,
I am. Yes, I am. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Pak.
you.
Thank you. We have 20 more minutes to be done, and here Pak Ayudin is raising hand. Okay, you can pose your questions, Pak Ayudin from BKSPI. Yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is Ayudin from Makassar State University and BKSPI. Allow me to ask to Mrs. Liva Seresta, Sled Structural Engineer, Asia Pacific. Thank you very much for moderators. If the building is subjected to earthquake pressure, the building varies is the degree of damage. Damage can be light, can be moderate, can be severe. If it is heavily damaged, can the building still be repaired? Especially in being column joint. Then, in terms of building structure analysis, is there an analytical approach to make the building in a stable condition when experiencing earthquake pressure? We hope that the analysis of the building can provide a stable response when experiencing earthquake loss. There are many analytical models that are given the name earthquake resistant building analysis. But if the building that is being built is subjected to earthquake pressure, in terms of that the building is heavily damaged and even collapsed, how to find a scientific approach analysis for earthquake resistant analysis buildings. So there's we don't need to focus on improvement, but a focus for earthquake resistant building analysis. Thank you very much.
Yes, I think you can get the questions, Liva. This is about a heavily damaged building or even torn down to nothing. How could you do that? And then go ahead, Liva.
So the way we address these buildings are, I mean, I think there should be also a line on when you want to retrofit a building and when you want to, you know, recommend that the homeowner tears down the building, right? So if the damage is really heavy, where you know, like let's say the wall is, if there's, like I showed a few pictures on my presentation, in some buildings the short wall completely was damaged and sort of completely collapsed. But looking at the structural system, if the structural system has a functioning load path, and then we can recommend that you can rebuild some damaged walls, heavily damaged walls, and still make the structure work. But in other cases where the building is already leaning very much, the load path has altered, and it's cheaper to demolish the building than to retrofit it, then we recommend to retrofit it. Another reason why we recommend to demolish the building is when there's like substantial damage in foundation. That's also something that's quite expensive to retrofit. Not impossible, but it's quite expensive to retrofit, especially in the cases of the type of buildings that we were dealing with, where we had to work for like really rural housing typologies in a place where a lot of equipment, a lot of construction materials are also available. There's like, I think the decision has to be made in looking at different contexts and situations as well as structure.
Okay, Pak Yudin, are you happy with that? The answer? Okay. Anyone else would like to raise their hands? Because I don't see any more questions in the chat box. Ada lagi mungkin yang ingin bertanya? Bisa diterjemahkan oleh Pak Fregi nanti pertanyaannya, karena kalau misalnya technical ya. This is Pak Bill Sinclair. Okay, this is just okay. Pak Bill Sinclair, given the most prevention is always better than the cure. Although Indonesia has had a good building code now for over 40 years, why is it that most single-story and low-rise buildings are not building constructed to resist earthquake? Given that most people reside in dwelling 1 or 2 stories, should not more effort put into codes appropriate for this structure? Well, this is actually Pak Wayan. You are the one that needs to answer this because. Okay, go ahead, Pak Wayan.
Yes, this is a good question. From every earthquake that, particularly in Indonesia, from the Aceh earthquake, Padang, Yogyakarta, as I mentioned in the presentation, there are many buildings or housing that are completely collapsed. With because the cause of that collapse is already very clear, because the guidelines on the earthquake resistant construction is not satisfied. So this is actually what we consider as lack of knowledge on the earthquake resistance construction. So that's why what is important in this regard is for the future to have the engineer to be able to identify what is a good practice in earthquake resistant design and construction. Well, not only the non-engineered building, but not only 1-story, 2-story building, but also some 3-story, 4-story, even like in Palu, for example, it's a hotel, a hotel collapsed because of the Palu earthquake. So the dissemination of the building code is of particular important. Let me repeat again. So we have a good building code. It's already referred to international building codes. So this code is not have a great impact if the engineers don't understand what is in the codes. For example, this is the one that I would like to say previously. The current code, the 2000, let's say the 2002 codes or the 2012 Indonesian building codes, is just understand by the engineer who involved in design, probably in Jakarta and the surrounding, or in Java. So many, I didn't say all, but many of our engineers in the other part of Indonesia, still using the old codes, using the old codes. So so this is the lag between the enhancement of our map and also the building codes with the understanding of the engineers who will design and also who will construct the buildings. What is lacking in my opinion is the dissemination of the building code. Again, I repeat, so we need to collect that. We need to, plan that institutionally. So the Department of Public Works, BNTB, and also I think many of our other associations need to get support to have the training of these codes. So yeah, I agree with Bill related to this. Prevention is more important than you have a disaster afterwards.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Wayan. I think we're running out of time. We would like then to stop. No more questions, but I would like to request a closing statement from each one of the resource person, so that we can bring home or at least apply it in individually or as a collective or organization of PII or anything. Please do state your closing statement so that we can really get something, and as professional engineers we are ready to do something what we are going to do according to the discussion here, that a role of the professional engineers in earthquake engineering and disaster preparedness, response and recovery can be done. I think quoting from Julia, in the best way. Okay, I think starting from again now backward again, starting from Julia, and then Pak Wayan, and then Liva. If you could provide a closing statement now.
Yeah, so I'd like to thank you again for inviting me here and for being part of this conversation. I think my one takeaway was I invite you to look at the document that I presented today. And I think it's really helpful for people to understand how much beyond the technical work that we do day to day in our professional lives, actually how that fits into a much bigger picture that needs to be applied when you are trying to do work in response to disaster scenarios, understanding the framework in which you're working, the skills that might exist, and also the particular challenges that the people you are trying to help might be encountering at this time. And it's something that sits outside a lot of our day-to-day work and a lot of our training. And part of the framework is just for people to take a step back and not to learn everything, but to have that awareness allows you to ask the right questions and to think about how you're going to approach any kind of work in these kind of settings. So I hope it's of interest, and if people have any follow-up questions through that website, we really encourage people to give feedback and questions so that we can make it a useful document for anyone working in that area, regardless of their background or regardless of where they will be working. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Prof. Wayan.
Just a second. Okay. I have highlighted several issues related to earthquake disaster. So particularly on the seismic hazard map and building codes, but that is already, let's say for now, is already taken care. I provide a lot of information based on my several visit to the earthquake disaster area, and also already provide you with what is the potential, what is the vulnerability of our buildings in Indonesia that need to be follow up with this reduction effort in the future. And the role of professional engineer is very significant to contribute in this disaster risk reduction process. Let me highlight again, not only the dissemination and also the training, but also the engineer or some of us who in the government position, let's say the local government. This is also an important part of the process in the permit. So the building permit is also very important. So in relation to the compliance of the building codes, I think the process of the one that now already in process, like in Jakarta, Surabaya, and also in many other big city, need to be followed by other cities in Indonesia. And this is the role of our engineer who now in position of the government to make this happen. And also the now many project is in the form of EPC, or engineering, procurement, and construction. So that is a good process, competitive process. But the the compliance of this building codes through that competition is a challenging process to make a quick resistance construction. Well, not only in Indonesia, I think all over the world is like that. So I challenge the participation and contribution of the engineer to involve and contribute in this disaster risk reduction process. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak. Thank you, Pak. Okay, Liva.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting me to speak at this event. It was a very interesting presentation from all and a very lively discussion. I just would like to sort of reiterate the fact that engineering should provide a solution, and it should not be a hurdle. We should be very aware and be adaptive out there in the field, not just in terms of technicalities, but also in terms of people, in terms of financing. So all these should be taken into account when designing a post-disaster project. And we should definitely learn our lessons from each disaster and keep doing better. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all the three resource person. What we have learned from this 2.5 hours discussion, that we realized that there are 4 things that needs to be done, at least from what we heard and from the presentation. First, also the needs of the proper and even detailed information. We cannot go anywhere without information. So something that been done by Build Change in Nepal, trying to collect the information on site. That's something that is needed for any case of earthquake disasters, and also the providing the seismic map from Professor Wayan. It's something that need to be updated all the time so that people will know about the hazards that can happen anytime, because earthquake cannot be really forecast. I mean, but it's there. The risk is there. And then the second one, of course, we are talking about hard skill. I'm glad that we're providing this professional engineer. Build Change explain all about the technical matters, structural mitigation, and also trying to do the recovery and reconstruction with proper retrofittings, both for the new homes and the traditional buildings, and that's actually what we heard from Pak Wayan in the case of earthquake Indonesia. So, however, a good thing to take from Liva's presentation, that we also need to do this more on the IoT, Internet of Things, hard skills with Internet of Things, and providing AI. That's what 5.0 revolution we need to do this, so that make it efficient and more quickly in terms of trying to do the building assessment. And the third one from Julia, of course, we heard more about soft skill. I mean, we as professional engineers need to be deployed at any time during disasters or before that for doing a disaster preparedness. But something we need to be comply with ethics, codes, and all kinds of soft skills to be able to reach or win the heart of the people. Because we are not coming as an expert to teach the people, but we are there to be with the people. And to make this even better, that we try to raise awareness with them. And the fourth one, of course, we realize of what we have learned. Regulation is another thing that is so important. We cannot do anything if we are doing all the technicals or the information without trying to
do something with the government or the duty bearer regarding the building codes. So building codes, according to Professor Wayan, we could do this collaboratively with all others, because the idea game of disaster is everyone business is something that we can do to provide the government with these things. And to try to reach the fourth, we need at least the first one, awareness of the people, awareness of this community of engineers. Thank you, Pak Habibie and Pak Frankie and Pak Bambang, to provide awareness for the PII. Yeah, this is something this webinar is awareness. And then the second one, of course, training. I heard all the time being echoing by Liva, Pak Wayan, and then Julia. Training. Capacity building is something that we need to do things as the best. And then, of course, regarding the regulation, of course, PII is one of the best actors to provide advocacy to make the world better, make the world safer, and everything else is needed to be there. And unfortunately, Liva mentioned, finance is also important. We cannot do anywhere. Yeah, we cannot do anywhere. So that's why PII can do collaboration, both internally, externally, with the government of Indonesia and with all. Saying that, I close my moderating process with saying that it is glad to be part of this discussion, and nothing can be done unless we really passionately want to do it, as to make the world a better and safer place. Thank you. God bless you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam
I
warahmatullahi
give back to
warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Pak Victor.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was a great moderate for this webinar session, and all the question presenters. Then, okay, for this closing statement, we need Pak Bambang to give us more deeper about this webinar, then close for this session, Pak.
Thank you, Pak. Thank you. So delighted, yeah. So excited and happy, yeah, to participate in listening all speakers, yeah, with so great experience, knowledge, and well recommendation also. And I believe this is very important to our associations, institution of engineers, as well as the government, and also individuals, yeah, civil engineering as individual. I think, of course, dissemination, trainings, etc., as recommended by speakers and lastly by Pak Victor, will be followed, yeah, but will be following up, yeah, and I think, yeah, I hope that this webinar is also participated by government, yeah. I hope so, yeah. So I think in the future, I think we have to collaborate with the government as well as with the international, like USA, Pak Victor, Pak Frankie Ken. Let us discuss about what next step of this after this seminar. Yeah, I think very important, because I think there is very limited number of engineers, yeah, aware of this situation, and despite of Indonesia location is very prone and very sensitive to earthquake, yeah. So thank you very much to all of participants, speakers, moderator, and also Pak Habibie and Pak Ken, yeah. Also Pak Prastiwo, yeah. And finally, with thanks to God, Alhamdulillah, I close this webinar and appreciate. Thank you very much. And we can meet again next time when the God permits us. Okay, thank you very much. Bye bye.
Before we close, can we have open video to have a photo session together with the moderator and speakers and all the audience? Yeah, Mas Imam.
Siap, Pak. Siap. kita foto bersama dulu.
Ya. Big
Terima
smile.
kasih Pak Wayan ya, Pak Wayan.
Ya, sama-sama Pak.
Iya, terima kasih Pak Wayan. Iya.
Oke Mas, apa-apanya Mas Imam?
Oke, slide pertama. 1, 2, 3. Lanjut, slide kedua. Siap. 1, 2, 3. Satu slide lagi. Bentar, tahan.
One more slide.
Ya, one more
Oke.
slide.
Terima
Oke, thank
kasih
you.
semuanya.
Thank you.
Assalamualaikum.
Very much.
Thank you Julia.
Om
Thank you
Swast.
Liva. Thank you
Ya, thank you.
Ya, Rifa.
Thank
Om
you
Swast.
all.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
semuanya.
See you next
All
later.
the
Pak
audience.
Prangki.
Thank you very much.
Ya,
Your
iya.
presentation
Thank you,
is
Pak
good.
Bambang.
Terima kasih Pak
Victor,
Bibi.
good moderator ya.
Terima kasih Pak Bambang.
Ya,
Senang
terima
bisa
kasih everybody.
Ketemu lagi di
Pak
Thanks very
Bibi.
much.
Thank you.
No, I live in.
Ya.
Oke.
Oke.
Terima kasih, selamat buat panitia, khususnya Pak Victor, juara betul memang
Terima
memoderasi.
kasih Pak Bambang. Terima kasih Pak Bambang.
Mantap Pak Victor.
Ya,
Ya,
kita
terima kasih.
terima kasih kepada para inisiator, khususnya Pak Bambang Guritno. Luar biasa.
Ya,
Mantap ini. Ya, pamit.